If you examine the surviving architectural photographs of the late 19th and early 20th centuries across virtually every major continent, from Western Europe and North America to Russia, South America, and Asia, you will encounter a staggering global visual paradox. Thousands of colossal hyper-engineered structures featuring massive domes, intricate metal spires, obelisks, and rose windows stood in cities that were supposedly populated by primitive horse and buggy societies. Mainstream architectural history assures us that these magnificent cathedrals, municipal buildings, and World Fair pavilions were built purely for aesthetic, religious, or administrative purposes, using wooden scaffolding, hand tools, and horse-drawn carts. But if you strip away the religious labels and subject these structures to an engineering analysis of electromagnetic resonance and atmospheric electricity, the primitive narrative completely dissolves. These grand structures were not built for worship. They were functional, high-frequency power plants designed to harvest free, wireless electromagnetic energy from the ionosphere. The architectural elements we treat as decorative art were actually precise technological components. The high metallic spires and copper-plated domes served as localized ionospheric receivers, pulling ambient electromagnetic power from the upper atmosphere. The intricate rose windows functioned as cymatic frequency resonators, while the massive stone arches and columns were engineered using specific crystalline quartz-rich stone types such as granite and marble to act as piezoelectric amplifiers and conduits. Inside these buildings, Mercury arc rectifiers and resonance cavities converted atmospheric static charges into clean, continuous, wireless power that illuminated entire cities without a single electricity meter or combustion engine. This advanced, globally integrated infrastructure belonged to a vast, unified pre-industrial civilization recorded on old maps as Tartaria. They operated a quiet, clean, and completely decentralized energy grid that rendered fossil fuels, coal power, and financial energy monopolies entirely obsolete. But to the architects of the coming industrial reset, an empire built on free, clean energy was a threat to the foundation of the modern financial control system. Before the modern world could be wired with copper cables, meters, and artificial scarcity, the grand electromagnetic grid of Tartaria had to be systematically decommissioned, repurposed, and erased from human memory. Today, Universal Files reopens the blueprint of the free energy era. If you walk through the historic downtown districts of modern cities across Russia, Europe, North America, or Asia, and pay close attention to the foundations of 19th century brick and stone buildings, you will notice a bizarre, ubiquitous architectural anomaly. Countless grand structures feature full-sized windows and elaborate entrances that sit partially or completely below the current street level. In many cases, excavators digging beneath these old streets uncover entire subterranean floors, complete with ornate arched doorways, decorative facades, and subterranean windows that lead directly into solid dirt. Mainstream urban history dismisses this global phenomenon with vague explanations, claiming these lower levels were coal chutes, settling foundations, or intentional street elevation projects. But when you analyze this pattern across thousands of cities globally, the narrative collapses under the weight of its own absurdities. We are looking at the physical evidence of a massive, synchronized geological event that occurred just prior to the industrial era, a worldwide mud flood. This was not a slow accumulation of dirt over centuries. It was a sudden, liquid soil inundation that washed across continents, burying the lower levels of Tartaria's infrastructure under millions of tons of liquefied clay, silt, and soil. The electromagnetic grid was disabled, the resonance chambers were choked with mud, and the heavy stone foundations were permanently locked into the earth. The sheer scale of this liquefied soil deluge suggests a deliberate geomechanical intervention, a weaponized manipulation of the water table, or a localized liquefaction event designed to wipe the slate clean. Following this mud deluge, the survivors and the architects of the New Order did not rebuild from scratch. They simply dug out the top levels of these buried stone complexes, paved new roads over the submerged first floors, and claimed these impossibly massive structures as their own creation. The grand buildings that once harvested free atmospheric energy were converted into municipal courtrooms, banks, and post offices, while their buried lower levels were sealed off behind brick walls and forgotten. The mud flood was the physical wipe command that buried the old world, leaving the surface ready for a new, controllable, and monetized industrial society. If you examine the official history of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, you will find it punctuated by a series of massive, spectacular global events known as the World's Fairs, or international expositions. From London 1851 and Paris 1889 to Chicago 1893 and Street Louis 1904. These events were presented as the ultimate celebration of modern industrial progress, showcasing the supposed invention of electricity, combustion engines, and architectural marvels. But the official narrative surrounding these expositions contains a colossal, logical void. We are told that these vast, complex cities, featuring massive domed palaces, artificial lagoons, and hyper-detailed sculptures, were built as merely temporary structures in a matter of months, using only wood, plaster, and horse-drawn labor. This is a deliberate historical absurdity. To a meticulous archive investigator, these expositions were not constructed. They were occupied, repurposed, and strategically looted remnants of the original, pre-flood Tartarian Empire. The grand palaces that supposedly showcased the first light bulb were, in reality, the original, fully functional electromagnetic power plants that had already been wirelessly illuminating their surroundings for centuries. The fair organizers simply installed diesel generators in the basements, ran temporary copper wires to the ancient Mercury rectifiers on the domes, and claimed the invention of electricity. This entire operation was a psychological masterclass in perception control, allowing the industrial resetters to showcase the advanced pre-flood infrastructure to the public as their own new invention, while gathering all the valuable, functional technology behind closed doors. The darkest part of the exposition protocol occurred once the fairs closed their gates. Instead of preserving these architectural and technological masterpieces for future generations, the official organizers engaged in a systematic campaign of total destruction. They used millions of pounds of dynamite to reduce these magnificent stone and metallic structures, which officially were just temporary wood and plaster, into clouds of white dust. What couldn't be exploded was burned in convenient accidental fires that wiped out massive fair districts. This was the final phase of the erasure. The high-frequency resonance spires and quartz-rich palaces that once harvested free energy were ground to rubble, paving the way for the grid-tied, monetized industrial cage we currently occupy. Wiping an advanced global civilization from the face of the earth requires more than simply demolishing its stone buildings and burying its power grid beneath mud. Buildings can be excavated, and machines can be reverse-engineered. The most critical component of any historical reset is demographic. You must systematically erase the living memory of the population and replace the adult custodians of history with a blank slate generation. In the mid to late 19th century, immediately following the global mud deluge and the destruction of Tartaria, a bizarre, unprecedented demographic phenomenon unfolded across North America, South America, Australia, and Europe. Hundreds of thousands of children, infants, toddlers, and young youths with no official birth certificates, no recorded surnames, and no lineage suddenly filled the orphanages of major cities. Mainstream history recorded their movement through a program known as the Orphan Trains. Between 1853 and 1929, over 250,000 parentless children were loaded onto steam trains in eastern ports like New York and Boston and shipped across the western frontier, distributed to families, farms, and industrial hubs like livestock. Where did this sudden tsunami of millions of parentless children come from in a world that had supposedly not yet experienced a world war? Mainstream narrative claims they were the offspring of poor immigrants who could not support them. But an archival analysis of the demographic numbers reveals a chilling alternative. The adult population of the pre-reset world had been purged during the mud flood and subsequent silent conflicts, leaving behind an entire generation of young children who were too young to remember the high-technology, free-energy society they were born into. These children were the biological reset buttons of the new world. They were stripped of their real identities, given newly printed birth certificates, and raised inside standardized, state-run public school systems specifically designed to teach them a fabricated historical timeline. They were taught that their ancestors were primitive horse and buggy farmers, that electricity was a brand new invention of the late 19th century, and that the grand stone palaces around them were built by their own impoverished fathers. In less than 2 generations, the living memory of Tartaria was completely erased. The Orphan Trains were not a benevolent charitable mission. They were a logistics program for a population replacement strategy, populating a reset world with obedient, memory-wiped workers ready to fuel the industrial money machine. When we assemble all the pieces of this historical investigation, the high-frequency atmospheric spires disguised as cathedral domes, the worldwide mud deluge that buried their stone foundations, the destruction of functional free energy plants under the guise of world's fairs, and the demographic erasure executed via the orphan trains, the ultimate motive behind the Tartaria reset reveals itself with absolute clarity. This was not a random shift in architectural taste or an organic progression of technology. It was a hostile takeover of human energy, independence, and resource allocation. The pre-reset world operated on a decentralized, abundant, and completely free atmospheric electromagnetic grid. The post-reset world was engineered to force humanity into a centralized, metered, and monetized industrial cage. To build the modern financial architecture, the architects of the reset had to make energy scarce. Clean, wireless power extracted directly from the ionosphere could not be metered, patented, or sold. It generated no monthly bills, required no oil pipelines, and created no coal monopolies. The solution was the rapid deployment of the carbon grid. The magnificent quartz-rich spires and copper resonance domes were systematically dismantled or capped with non-conductive materials. In their place, miles of heavy copper wires were strung across every continent, tethering every home and factory to a centralized power plant that burned coal, oil, and gas. The free energy of the atmosphere was replaced by the polluting combustion of fossil fuels, creating an artificial scarcity that instantly turned every human being from an independent observer into a lifelong debtor to the energy monopolies. Today, we walk past the grand stone remnants of Tartaria, our municipal buildings, older universities, and grand cathedrals, entirely unaware that we are looking at the neutralized engines of a lost electromagnetic golden age. We pay monthly subscriptions for wireless communications and electricity that our ancestors extracted cleanly from the air above their heads. The Tartaria anomaly stands as a silent monument to what was taken from us, an entire world of free energy, clean architecture, and long-lived independence, swapped for a metered existence where every breath, every watt, and every moment of life comes with a price tag. The files are open, the blueprint is decoded, and the memory of Tartaria is restored. Access closed for now.